What's going on, guys? It's Adam P, and welcome back to more Newcastle United news. We are now looking ahead to FC Barcelona on Thursday, our first Champions League match, and it's against a team historically Newcastle has a lot of history with, and it's a game where, even though I look at their scoreline 6-0 yesterday without Yamil Yamal, you know what? I still fancy our chances. I'm still confident. I'm still going to back Newcastle with our starting 11 now to actually try and go out and to beat Barcelona. I generally think we have a good enough team that is capable of taking on anyone at St James's Park. Bearing in mind, atmosphere will be bouncing. Everyone's going to be behind Newcastle, and I reckon we've got a real chance of doing it. And we've got all sorts of news to get into in this video. Of course, if you're new around here, make sure I get down there, hit that subscribe button, join the 45% of you who are now on the journey to make sure you don't miss out on the build-up, on the Barcelona game, and on everything with our Champions League this season. We will be at all 4 away games. We're going to be at every single match. I can't wait to see what Newcastle United has in store during this campaign. Starting off, we have yet another Champions League ticket nightmare situation where we're just going to get through it now, explain what's going on, just to make sure everyone who has planned on going any away games, going to matches at St James's Park, just so everyone understands how the ticket structure works for the Champions League. We already had this situation last week, but over 110,000 supporters were waiting in the queue on our club website to try and get what would have been about 1,000 Barcelona tickets on the website. And we actually have 45 tickets that were distributed to a private Dundee school, which costs you £20,000 a year to be able to take your child to that school. Newcastle United were not aware of these 45 tickets. They've now cancelled those 45 tickets, which raises suspicion for me because a school has to have all the tickets together. To show you an example, this is a school at St James's Park against Wolves. It is fairly obvious to see if a school is in attendance for the game. So how Newcastle weren't aware of this school, bearing in mind it's not the first time they've done it either. This Dundee school has got tickets in the past. How Newcastle's only spotted this now raises questions. And if it was a case where Newcastle did not know, how is the 45 tickets together at St James's Park where all of these 45 people are selling their tickets up? It's a bit suspicious, and that's the one just last week. We've got a different one today regarding Union SG, which of course is our first away game. It's actually been moved already to Anglex Stadium, and even then, our away end, when I mean it's small, guess how many tickets were available before you've even seen it on the screen. Guess how many tickets were available for Newcastle fans that could actually go onto the website and buy tickets up? 586 tickets, 200 loyalty points. You actually need at least 200 loyalty points to go to this game. Now, I'm someone who, considering my age, I do have a lot of loyalty points. I do not have 200. 200 is an insane amount. You actually need 200 loyalty points just to be guaranteed a ticket to Union SG. Only 586 out of a possible 1,050 available to Newcastle fans, which means around half of the tickets are not available to supporters at all. Now, on top of the 586 tickets, there is a small amount in a ballot. Now, I think this ballot thing, by the way, for away tickets now, most fixtures, fair enough, not this one. In the ballot, all you have to do is to declare your interest in attending the fixture, which means if you have 2 loyalty points, you have the same chance of going to this game as someone who has 199 loyalty points will. Everyone's in the ballot, random chance. 2 loyalty points, you could go to that game over someone with 199 loyalty points, which I think is wrong. To give you my straight up answer now. Our fixtures, fair enough. Not this one. There shouldn't be a ballot for this game, in my opinion. And the rest of the tickets available go to staff members, go to families, and go to everyone at the football club. And you can understand younger. I just think the attendance is crazy in the first place. I mean, 1,050 in the Champions League is not a lot at all. And to explain how these staff member tickets were, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, I'm not a staff member. I've heard things over the years. I believe every player gets 2 each, so they're entitled to bring 2 family members, whoever they want to bring along. And that's every player, I suppose. So John Ruddy, Mark Gillespie, you're talking all the players that won't play at all. They still get 2 tickets. And then after that, the staff get put into a ballot. So staff members aren't guaranteed. I'm imagining a lot of them probably would get tickets in the end, but then they're going to own separate ballot and they'll be selected out. But again, when you look at the mass behind it, about half the tickets are at the supporters, and then the rest are either in a ballot or towards staff members. I think a lot of them are towards the staff members. I'll probably argue maybe around 40% of the tickets on at Newcastle fans. So I think that's a problem we have every single fixture. But just going through it now, that's what fans are irked about today, because when you've got the Belgian game in consideration, I think anyway, when you look at Champions League, Union SG and Leverkusen are the only two matches people want to go to. Nobody wants to do Marseille. Nobody wants to do PSG. I'm going to do every single game, but I could understand, especially for fans that could only afford one or two games, they're not going to do the France games. Not going to go to PSG again. And Marseille is crazy. I mean, Marseille, you generally need a knife vest on it. That one doesn't mess around at all. It's fair to say the fan zone in Union SG is going to be big. Everyone's going to be in the fans and nobody's going to be in the stadium at this rate. Everyone's going to be enjoying themselves in the bars. I'll be there in the bars, I'll be there at the fans, and I'll be there enjoying my time in Brussels. And that's going to be the situation for, I would argue, probably about 99% of fans at this rate, because just that many people are going to be missing out on this game. And for our Champions League matches, it'll be a lot easier getting tickets because the allocations are a lot bigger. Again, I reckon this is by far the most popular fixture to go to. Our 3 games will be fine. If you've got a decent amount of loyalty points, I reckon if you've got between 40 to 50, you should be getting the hour 3. If you've got less than that, I'm not entirely sure. But what about you guys watching this video? How many loyalty points do you want? And what do you think about this new away ticket structure? I'm actually completely messed it up, and I'm not going to the Bournemouth game on Sunday. And I'll explain why, because I've actually effed up the new ticket structure. But go into a bit more detail about that on Sunday. I'm aware there's a lot to get to in the video. But yet again, Champions League tickets, we've got a nightmare situation at this football club where the fans are just kicking off constantly with what's going on behind the scenes. I can understand the frustration. I honestly can. But in this particular fixture, it's just such a nightmare fixture anyway. Even in a new stadium where it's not supposed to be their ground, even then 1,000 away fans, and half of them not even went to Newcastle fans. So it is just a nightmare to get through. Moving over into the football side of things now, I wanted to mention this guy again, but Benjamin Sesko yet again has dropped his stinker for Manchester United. 0 goals in 5 games now, 3 shots on target across 5 matches. And bear in mind, one of those games against Grimsby Town, where he stepped up to take Manchester United's 10th pen of a shootout. If that's not a striker, low on confidence, I don't know what is. And it's quite a sad story, I would say, because if he was playing for Newcastle now, I don't think he'd be this bad for us. I actually think Benjamin Sesko, if he was at Newcastle, bearing in mind, he would have joined a lot earlier for Newcastle as well. Probably would have made his debut around maybe the Leeds game, perhaps a bit earlier against Liverpool, but he would have been here earlier. Would he have kicked on for Newcastle? Would he have scored at least 1 goal by now? I would like to see he would. You see Nick Walter match, he's headed it in there. Didn't get an awful amount of chances against Wolves, but was clinical and was a real presence in our team. I reckon he would have done well as well as Sesko. So just seeing how bad he's at Manchester United, I kind of have to blame him at the same time, because I'm not deluded, you're not deluded. I think every single football fan can see that Manchester United is a graveyard for strikers, a graveyard for players joining up and just ruining their own careers. And that was the choice he chose to make. And so far, it's not going well for him. And I have to say, once again, it's a real bullet dodge for Newcastle. It's just not going well for him. And that's a player who would have been number 1 in our striker rankings, and to see him not turn up at all for Manchester United, I think we dodged the bullet. I'd actually rather have Nick Walter over this guy. I feel like Nick just seems to be a lot more composed, comfortable, and just seems to be more suited for Newcastle's player style, whereas Sesko just seems to be a player that does not fit at all in the Premier League and is just having a bad time so far. I mean, awful time for him. He could be one of the worst signings of the season if he didn't get it together. Going into the Barcelona game, we'll start off. Robert Lewandowski's went into detail about how, I wouldn't say he used to be a Newcastle fan, but he certainly used to have a Newcastle shirt. His father bought him a shirt, Chio on the back. And it's just a reminder how massive Newcastle were in the 90s. And especially when you hear players at opposition clubs now, and when you hear the stories about our Champions League clubs, a lot of players and a lot of staff members always look at Newcastle as that huge team from the 90s that were in the Champions League, that were chasing Premier League titles, and a team that, despite winning nothing during that time period, was a massive football team, a real entertainer squad, a team that everyone worldwide loved to watch. And Shio, of course, was one of the biggest strikers on the planet at the time, a ridiculously good player. And you see, Robert Lewandowski, a player who almost had a completely different career, because he was supposed to join Blackburn Rovers in around 2010, and then he had the volcano eruptions across Europe, which stopped his flight from going to Blackburn, which meant he never moved to Blackburn Rovers, and now you just seen the career he's had. And he's going to be the real star man, I reckon, for Barcelona this week. Without Lamine Yamal, he's the focal point now. He'll be a real player to watch. And Rafinha, to be fair, alongside him as well, unbelievable players. And you seen yesterday, even without Yamal, still won 6-0 Barcelona, comfortable, composed, and a team that has serious quality. And despite Barcelona dropping off a little bit since they lost Messi a few years ago, hasn't took them long to get back up, and they're a team now that has a serious chance of actually doing well this year. I reckon they've got a good chance of winning the Champions League, Barcelona, especially with their squad. But for Newcastle, especially at St James's Park, I think we'll catch them out. If it was at the new camp, fair enough, fair game. But St James's Park, I honestly think we can do it. And when you actually speak about the Barcelona manager, he goes into detail, Flick, about how he admires Newcastle staff members quite a lot. He'll be seeing them soon. I don't know what that reference is supposed to be. Is he going to take Jason Tyndall off us? Is he trying to take Eddie Howe and put him in his Barcelona team? I don't know what's going on here, but I see the staff members. I think he means that he's seen them this week. But yeah, I got a bit panicky when I first saw that message. I felt like he was going to try and take our staff members off us. But yeah, I think he means he's going to be looking forward to seeing Jason Tyndall and Howe this week, which is quite a statement, considering a few years ago when we first got to Newcastle, would never imagine this in a million years. But it's a real admiration, a real sign of respect from a lot of different football teams now towards Newcastle, and especially towards how Newcastle plays as well. They're quite an ambitious, expansive team, and a team that I think deep down he knows he's in for a hard time. PSG found out the hard way 2 years ago, and he knows, and he'll be looking at that game quite a lot about how relentless Newcastle can be in the attacking third, and how once the crowd is against Barcelona at St James's Park, how hard it can be for Barcelona to get into the game as well. I think they're in for a real tough time. They're not used to these sort of atmospheres. Spanish football doesn't tend to have an atmosphere like that outside of the El Clasico. So I'm expecting Newcastle to really give us a good go. I'm expecting us to do well here. I'm expecting the result. I'm generally might come across as deluded there. I believe we've got the utilities there to be able to beat them. I actually think we do. Finally, I want to go into a bit more detail about this Lewandowski and Toni Kroos thing now, because this is now two different world-class players who over the last couple of weeks has now went into a lot of detail about the Newcastle connections. And Toni Kroos is the weird one because he's never had that Newcastle connection. He's been a player who has now grown into Newcastle United, has actually watched Newcastle and started to enjoy the team. That's before we signed a couple of German players as well, so he's probably going to love Newcastle even more now. And it's a weird thing where Newcastle should be taking advantage of this. I stand by it as well. Toni Kroos, I don't know what Newcastle needs to do, but give this guy an opportunity to come to the training ground, let him sit down and let him interview Walter Moore, let him interview Malik Chow, let him actually come to Newcastle's training ground and do a podcast inside the training ground. Just let him do his own thing, because these are the sort of people, especially with his pedigree, especially with his background and how well utilised he's been at different football clubs and the world's best as well. He's someone who went on board at Newcastle United, especially when you want to get young German players and you want to bring in the youth players and trying to attract players at this football club. He's the sort of guy that's going to do it, and I stand by Newcastle needs to be utilising an opportunity like this. He clearly likes Newcastle United, and I would almost argue, I wouldn't say he's twerking for, but I certainly think he's a player for that to look at to try and get involved with Newcastle United. I feel like how positive and how vocal he's been about Newcastle United, about him calling out ex-football players who've left the club, going into a lot of detail about why he enjoys Newcastle. I actually reckon he got a real chance to try and work something out of a player of his quality, and it's something Newcastle should be doing. And Newcastle, actually, especially around the 90s as well, we've seen they've got a lot of well-supported players that are now playing at a top level. I think Bukayo Saka is a good example. I think his dad's quite a big Newcastle fan. He used to always sneak Saka along to the games at St James's Park. So even though I don't think Saka deep down is probably a massive Newcastle fan, his family certainly is. So even down the line, Newcastle can use opportunities like that. You've got a real chance, and it's about laying the foundations now. So within the next 15 to 20 years, you've got all of these youth players, all these young players growing up and all Newcastle fans, and then Newcastle can just start bringing in these class players and just making them even better. And I want to finish this video off while going at the obvious point. I think you got to talk about the situation now. We can look forward ahead in the future all we want. The reality is now we've got one striker with us out for at least the next 6 matches, and I have to say, good thing we didn't sell Osula. Imagine we actually saw Osula. Had a good chance of doing it as well, especially from that rumoured £30 million and a buyback clause, which is just ridiculously good. But now the reality is Usula's number 2 again, and Usula will have a good opportunity. I think he'll start against Bradford next week. I think he might actually start in the Premier League, potentially, depending on how Watermark is. Realistically, you can't start it against Bournemouth on Sunday, can we? You can't play him 90 minutes against Barca and then play him 90 again against Bournemouth, especially after already playing against Wolves. I feel like you need to give this guy a chance. He's incredibly young, had a great debut against Wolves. You don't want to overburn him. And we also had this problem over the past couple of years as well. You don't want to be over-reliant on one striker. You need to try and make sure that this guy can have a rest. This guy as well, especially when he's playing, you don't want him to be constantly thinking, if I don't have a good game, we're going to lose. Like, you want this guy to be able to relax and play football, especially with one striker. We're always going to have that problem. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with Usula, but a reminder that we nearly saw Usula, so we would have been actually in trouble if that was the case. And Bournemouth, believe it or not, is the game I'm actually worried about. I generally think Bournemouth, that's a game we never win at our best, never mind now, after a Barcelona game where you kind of have to put 100% in the one of the 2 games. It's not realistic that you're going to be able to get the best out of both matches. You have to prioritise one. And everyone watching this video, what game would you prioritise now? They're all going to say Barcelona. So Newcastle's going to go all out against Barcelona. I think Bournemouth is fortunate enough. They haven't got European football played the weekend. They won't play again until us. They've got the break and they've got a chance against Newcastle to catch us out. And I actually reckon they will. I think they've got a real chance of catching us out at Newcastle unless we have a top quality performance. I think we're going to drop points down there. And it's a unfortunate situation which we've seen 2 years ago where Newcastle have a good time in the Champions League, do well in the home games. All of a sudden we're dropping points every single away match, and we want to make sure it's not a similar situation again. But as long as Johan Wissa's injured and you've only got one real striker in the team, you're going to have this problem. It is going to be a problem, and this Wissa thing's just so annoying because he hasn't even put any Newcastle shirt on yet and trained with the players. He's already injured. So it's a nightmare, but it is what it is. And I wanted in this video just to go through, I guess, a bit more of the news, a bit more of the Newcastle background news and what's going on with talking players of different football clubs, what the manager and what everyone's saying ahead of the Barcelona game, and then going into detail about the ticket structure in the Champions League, because Newcastle, even away from the football, still has a lot of noise and still has a bit of a nightmare scenario where you've got so many fans that are wanting to go to the games and then so many fans that are furious or unhappy, and you've got a ticket situation here where half of the tickets aren't even going to the fans anymore. I don't even know where the tickets are going at this rate, but they're going all over the place, and you can understand the frustration. There's going to be massive fans. I'm telling you now, that fan zone in Belgium is going to be quality. I can't wait for the fan zone. But yeah, anyone that's inside the ground, you have to be loyal to being there. We'll have to admit, or extremely lucky in the ballot. But yeah, only the fans that have attended, you're talking well over a decade worth of away matches, 200 plus games you have to be attending to actually being there. So fair enough if you're one of the people in there. But yeah, I've never seen it that high before. Crazy. Thank you guys for watching though. Take care. Let me know your opinions down below, and we will see you all in the next one.